In this video, I want to give you a rundown of the multi-camera setup that we're using here at South Fellowship Church. And this multi-camera setup is using all Panasonic cameras. We have 4 cameras total. We have 2 BGH1 box cameras, and then we have a GH5, and then we have a GH5 version 2. I'll say up top, I am very impressed with the image quality that you're able to get with these cameras straight out of the box. I've been a long-time Panasonic user. A lot of the videos that you've seen here in the early days of Churchfront, I've shot on a GH5, I've shot hundreds of weddings on a GH5, and then we've used GH5s in live streaming environments before. But I've never had enough Panasonic cameras to do a full multi-camera setup here at church. We usually use a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4Ks. I want to thank Panasonic for loaning me a few of these cameras to try them out and to be able to just simulate what it would be like using them for a full multi-camera setup. And I will say this video is not sponsored by Panasonic. They're just loaning me the cameras, and unfortunately I have to give them back in a couple weeks from now. Tempted to buy some of these BGH1 box cameras because I just love the image quality that they produce. So let's dive into the setup. I've got 4 cameras for the setup in the sanctuary. Our space here seats around, I think up to 700 people max, but I think we only got seating in here for about 400 people. So let's just go through each position. I'll show you what camera I'm using, and then you can see the results of that camera. So back here, kind of in the back center of the room, right in our tech booth, we have our main camera that gets the tighter center shot of our stage. Keep in mind, we don't have a dedicated camera operator for any of our cameras, so these are all stationary cameras. I find that 4 angles gives you plenty of angles to bounce around with, and we have coverage of the entire stage just to keep the live stream just visually compelling for whoever's watching. Someday though, I'd love to have a dedicated follow camera operator back here. But this camera back here is the BGH1 box camera, and then it has a f2.8 70-200 Canon lens. In this shot, just as a reliable shot of our worship leaders on stage, or our pastor who's preaching the sermon, or anybody else, anything that's kind of going on the focal point or the center portion of our stage. So the BGH1 box cameras, these are newer models from Panasonic, and I was excited when they offered to loan these to me because we actually have a perfect scenario where this works really well for us. We were already using this Atmos external monitor with our Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera that we had right here, and it's a great way to be able to pull focus. You don't have to like climb up there and look at the LCD on the back of the camera. So for the BGH1, which has no LCD built in, it's just a simple box camera, and you can really rig it however you want. We're able to go HDMI out directly into the Atmos monitor right here. We have focus peaking on it, and we can also just get a really great framing with this monitor. And then out of the Atmos monitor, it goes to the video switcher. But what's really cool about the BGH1 cameras, let's say you want to get into the menu system, start dialing in the settings and exposure, you don't necessarily need to buy an expensive external monitor like this Atmos monitor. You can actually just get your laptop. So here's my MacBook Air. I downloaded the Lumix Tether for Multicam app. That's the one that's compatible with the BGH1 cameras. And then here you can see I have a live view of the camera, and I can go into all the exposure settings right here. So let's say I wanted to go in change the aperture. I can crank it up and you see how it gets darker there. So you can access all of the camera settings from the companion app, the Lumix Tether for Multicam application. So those are exposure settings, and then I can go into the menu here as well and dial in additional settings. So since most of our angles are stationary, I really just have to pull my laptop out, plug it into the camera over USB-C, and then I can dial in the settings, make sure it's framed the way I want, and then kind of can just set it and forget it. And of course, we can always monitor the camera in the preview screen here on the multicam, and if something gets out of whack, if someone bumps into it or exposure needs to be adjusted, it's easy to just get the laptop and go do that. Another thing to mention about this camera setup in the BGH1, actually all these cameras, is they are micro 4/3 cameras. So when we're using glass like this Canon lens right here, we actually have a speed booster that makes that adapts the connection from the EF mount lens to a micro 4/3 camera body. So we actually use the same setup for all of our Blackmagic cameras, which also have micro 4/3 sensors. So the image quality of the BGH1 is fantastic. The image is super sharp. It also has good dynamic range. I'll have Chipper play back some footage for you here of our sermon where you have a TV screen on stage, which is pretty bright. And they also have the pastor, your subject, or whoever's communicating and teaching that morning. And you want to make sure that they're well lit. You want to set the exposure for them. I use the natural color setting in all these cameras, including this BGH1 here. I did find that the highlights were a little bit blown out for the first service, so you can see footage of that. But then all I had to do is I went into my menu settings here. I just selected the photo style, and like I said, I went to the natural photo style here, and then I can just dial back my highlights with this little meter right here. So I love how you can actually customize the color settings really easy in these Panasonic cameras. You don't have to go design your own LUT or anything like that. You can just do it all within the camera body, and then you can just save those custom settings. You'll probably find with the Panasonic cameras, when you use the standard picture profile, it's going to be pretty contrasty. So that's why I like the natural picture profile, and then from there, I might bump or reduce the highlights and shadows to get the image that I like. So that's the BGH1. It's a box camera. Like I said, you need some sort of external monitoring device, whether it's a nice monitor or it could also just be a laptop running the app. Highly recommend these cameras for churches, especially for these spots in your setup that you just want a stationary camera. It's going to have a high quality image for you, and you don't really have to move it around a whole lot to reframe or change your exposure. And there are so many more videos on YouTube. You can learn more about this camera. I'm not going to dive into all the tech specs, but just know you can easily get an amazing clean image coming out of the HDMI port on this. Also, there's an SDI port, all sorts of amazing features they built into this camera. So that's why I highly recommend it. You can learn all about the other tech specs here on YouTube. Just search for this camera. While we're back here in the tech booth, I did want to touch briefly on this camera. So before we were using a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K camera. We'll go back to that probably this coming weekend. And right now we have a GH5 on this slider. One of the great things about using a camera like the GH5 on a rig like this is the in-body stabilization that the GH5 has. The BGH1 does not have in-body stabilization, so keep that in mind when you are using those cameras. You probably want to have them in some fixed spots or on tripods. But the GH5 is amazing for anything that has rigging like this. It's moving because this motorized slider, sometimes we notice some like jitters and stuff like that on our Blackmagic Pocket 4Ks, which don't have in-body stabilization. So I'm a huge fan of using a GH5 in a spot like this, and you'll notice in some of these wide shots that we have here from our live stream, it's super smooth. You don't notice any of that shaking or vibrations from this slider. So this is a GH5 version 1, the camera that's been out since 2017 now. I call this camera Old Faithful because I've used it on so many video shoots, and it gets amazing results. The lens that I have on that back camera getting the wide shot is a micro four thirds 25mm lens. Before we head on to the next two cameras, I do want to invite you to check out worshipministryschool.com. You'll see a link below this video where you can hop on a free strategy session with one of our coaches. Our team specializes in coming alongside of churches and helping them implement the latest technology for worship ministry. So cameras, live streaming gear, running tracks in your ministry, getting a better sound, whether it's live in person or for your broadcast mix. Those are all things we partner with churches to help them hit their goals, to build teams, and ultimately just facilitate gospel-centered and engaging worship. So check out the link below this video, hop on a free strategy session. We look forward to chatting with you soon. So let's go ahead and move on to our other cameras. Let's move on to our side stage camera angle. This gets the kind of our backline musicians, piano, guitarist, and kind of a wider shot of the drummer. The camera I'm running here is the GH5 Mark II, version 2, whatever they're calling it. This is one of the cameras that the local Panasonic rep let me borrow. I honestly did not spend a ton of time diving into all of the features, whatever the new features were for this camera. It looks like a GH5, it feels like a GH5, and again, there's so many videos on YouTube. You can learn more about what they actually put into this thing that's new. In terms of being a great live streaming camera for churches, I don't really know if there's that many significant advantages on GH5 version 2 versus just the regular old GH5. So maybe you could save some money for a purpose like this. Just get the regular GH5, find a used one out there for pretty cheap, and it's still going to work great for you. You still have the Obviously you can output 1080p and 24 or 30 frames a second for your live stream. And then it also has the in-body stabilization, all the great features of the GH5. I think this camera has a few additional recording codecs, so if you're gonna double dip your camera for both like creative media at your church and live streaming, then probably the GH5 too is worth it if you want some of those features that are gonna be better for you as a filmmaker. This camera has a 12 to 60 millimeter micro four thirds Leica lens. I really love this lens. This was one of my favorite lenses, especially for like vlogging. A lot of videos we did here on the Churchfront channel until we broke it when the tripod was knocked over with this camera. So I don't have one of these lenses of my own anymore. This is actually the kit lens that they gave me with this camera, and it works really well for this side shot here. I have it zoomed in all the way to 60 millimeters, so that's what this shot looks like on our live stream, and it just perfectly frames our band. So here I am beside the drum set, and this is our drum cam. I think it's great to have a drum cam. By the way, if you're building a multi-camera setup, I would have definitely a tighter center shot and then have like a nice wide shot of the whole room. Those are the first two cameras I showed you. Then like a side stage shot, and then if you had a fourth camera you could add in, I would do a drum cam or a closer piano cam. I think drums are great. It's fun to watch a drummer play. So I have a drum cam here. This is another one of the BGH1 box cameras, and this one has a EF mount Sigma lens. This lens is an 18 to 35 millimeter EF mount lens, and then has a speed booster, which is going to give us additional light because it can have a lower f-stop, and then also it's gonna give us a wider perspective too. It kind of actually widens the focal length of the lens, which is perfect for a shot that's really close to our drummer. It's wide enough you can get the whole drummer and you can see the band behind him. So again, very happy with the results of the BGH1. There's some overexposure issues that I had that I could have fixed and resolved, again, if I brought my laptop over here and maybe dialed down those highlights a bit, but you can easily do that and get that taken care of yourself if you go with one of these cameras. I was leading worship and kind of running the tech team this past Sunday, so I didn't have time to do both of those things, but you guys know, you know how it is. But again, this camera is great. You can really dial in the settings to look amazing coming straight out of the camera. In this particular situation, I don't have an external monitor, so I use my laptop, and then for our video run, I'm actually using the SDI connection that's built in to this camera. So I'm a huge fan of just having direct SDI outputs, so then I don't have any converters or anything like that. It goes SDI directly to our video switcher in the back. So that's it, guys. This is a pretty simple video. I only wanted to walk you through just what it's like using all Panasonic cameras for a church live streaming multicam. My final verdict is it's a really great system to go with. My favorite systems are Panasonic Micro Four Thirds setup like what you just saw here today. I like the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4Ks and 6Ks, although I think the Blackmagic cameras do require more work to dial in the proper color settings and the image quality that you're getting straight out of the camera. I'm not a huge fan of the factory LUTs that are built into the Blackmagic cameras. And it makes sense. Those cameras are more made for kind of independent filmmakers who are shooting in log. They're doing color grading afterwards, whereas these Panasonic cameras, in my 5-6 years of experience with Panasonic cameras, is that they're always just great for like quickly getting an amazing image. So you've seen for yourself with the footage that we probably play back in this video. If you want to see our entire church live streams, I'll link below an example of a full service using the Panasonic cameras, and then also a service using our Blackmagic cameras. And then I'll also link all the gear that we use down below in the description. If you'd like to learn more about building an advanced multi-camera streaming setup for your church, check out our online course down below. It's going to walk you through how to set up, all the cameras, dial in exposure, in framing, also how to use a hardware video switcher like any of the Blackmagic ATEM switchers, the video hub, the HyperDecks, the encoding using software services and hardware like Resi. We walk through all of that in our advanced multi-camera live streaming for churches online course. So be sure to hop in that course, link down below in the description if you want to implement this same system at your church. And if you're just not sure which aspect of our program is right for you, make sure you hop on a free strategy session with one of our coaches for Worship Ministry School. They can assess your worship ministry, your goals, and they can help you come up with a clear plan for moving forward. So you'll see a link for a free strategy session down below this video as well. Thanks so much for watching. Smash like, subscribe, share with your friends. See you next time.